many people registered to come on?
That in 1 second.
Sure.
About 18 people or so.
Okay. Welcome, Senator.
I had to figure out how to unmute. Hello.
So actually, Saida does that for us. She helps us run our meetings. So I'm definitely going to amend our agenda and put you on first. We're getting ready to start. We have about 18 people who are registered participants. So I'm going to wait just a minute or two and then get started.
Sounds good.
And again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I guess, Lynn, while we're waiting, I can give the brief introduction about managing, raising your hands and things like that.
Perfect.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. A few notes for you, particularly if this is your first meeting with us. You will notice that you are muted and unable to mute yourself. After presentations, the co-chair or the chair in this instance may call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can ask to be recognized by raising your virtual hand, and you can do that by going to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. It's important not to raise your physical hands or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you among the participants. If you're on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 or *6 to unmute. And once you're recognized by the chair, I will unmute you. You may be prompted to confirm unmuting on your device. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you can access the raise hand feature by clicking the participants button on the menu at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. The chat function is available for technical support only, not to ask questions of the chair. You can send me a chat if you're having any technical issues and I can help troubleshoot them with you. And back to you, Lynn.
Thank you, Saida. And so what I'd like to do is I'm going to start by amending our agenda. And for the first position on our agenda, we are going to be really proud to welcome Deputy Leader of the State Senate, Michael Janarius, who is from Queens, who will soon be hopefully representing Roosevelt Island. And I love the dog.
I'm sorry, this was not a plan, but he's very needy right now. So,
So you're his emotional support person, I get it.
I think that's what happens. He loves to be on Zooms, so here he is. This is Fred. Anyhow.
It's you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Quiet, Fred. Okay. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you everyone for giving me. I'm going to put him down here. You never tell what he wants. But I appreciate having a couple of minutes to talk with you guys today. And I know Russell, who's I think the board chair, is on also, so it's nice to get to see him as well. I just wanted to start to get to know you all. As Lynn mentioned, the redistricting lines have changed, and the district that I currently represent is kind of taking on Roosevelt Island and parts of the Upper East Side up in the 90s. And even though I won't officially be representing the area until January 1, I will be running for office for election, including in these areas. So I'm sorry for the noise if you can hear him, but he's, he is how he is. 4-month-old, that's what'll happen. And so Roosevelt Island is a place I've been to many times in my life, as you're all very much aware. The only bridge connecting you all to the rest of the city comes right into kind of the historic Long Island City border. So I've ridden my bike through your island many times. I've visited the park. I've been to events there, and I will consider it an honor if I get the chance to represent the area. And you can count on seeing me there often. Lynn and I spoke a little bit earlier today, and she mentioned the Saturday market is something I have to come to, and so we're going to put that on my agenda. I don't think I can come this weekend, but I will be there in short order, and if any of you are there, I will get to say hello in person. In addition, and I do want to say a word that Senator Serrano is a great colleague and a diligent representative. And he actually was sad that he was losing the island. When we saw the lines come out, he called me and said he was not that excited about that part of the change. But first of all, he's still your senator through the end of the year, and he has offered his assistance and working with me on things that he may already be working on with all of you. And so I look forward to the collaboration with him, and I really look forward to collaborating with all of you on issues of importance to Roosevelt Island. And so, most people in the city, I think, when they think of Roosevelt Island, they think of the Tram and the Spider-Man movie. And there's a lot more going on there than just that. So it's up to the rest of us to educate everybody else. And I look forward to doing that with you. And Lynn, if you want me to take questions, you would want me to talk about the redistricting process a little bit and how this happened?
Yeah, a little bit about that, and maybe a little bit about the state budget, and then really briefly about some of the things that are going on right now with the Queensboro Bridge, because I think that's impacting people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start with redistricting. As I'm sure you know, every 10 years we have to redo the district lines, and we have been coming off many decades, not to get too partisan here because this is not a political event, but for many decades the Republicans controlled the Senate and manipulated the lines to give more representation upstate and less downstate because that's where they had more members. And they did this by underpopulating the upstate districts, so they had more representatives, and overpopulating the New York City districts, so we had fewer in the Senate. So this year, obviously, we have a Democratic majority, so we had control of that process, and we set about to fix that. And so now all the districts throughout the entire state have roughly equal population, which is the way it should be. But that necessitated the addition or the shifting of 2 seats from upstate to downstate. And so we have a new district, one's in Brooklyn, which didn't really impact us very directly, but there is one that was created on the Queens-Brooklyn border, Long Island City, Greenpoint, Ridgewood, Woodhaven, and those were areas I used to represent, not Greenpoint, but the Queens side of it. And so that pushed my district upwards and north and west in order to accommodate the parts of my current district that were going into this new one. And north and west of me is Roosevelt Island and the Upper East Side. So that's how the pressure got put geographically for me to go over there. It seemed like a natural thing. I used to joke with Senator Serrano that he had to get through my district to go visit you guys every time he came out there. So now it'll be a much more direct trip for me. And I look forward to it. So that's the redistricting process. The budget is actually in better shape than we usually deal with. It's due March 31, so we're kind of a month and a half away from concluding it. We are flush with money for a couple of reasons, and that's like such an unusual thing to hear when dealing with the state budget, but it's true. We received a pretty significant influx of federal aid during the pandemic, and so that money is still there and flowing. And then we also increased taxes on people making over $1 million a year last year, which generated about $4 billion over what we normally have. Last year, we did great things with the extra funds. We finally fulfilled the promise of the CFE lawsuits, a lawsuit about 15 years old called the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, which was successful. And the highest court said that we have been underfunding our public schools for a long time and mandated increased funding, and then that decision was ignored for many years. We finally fulfilled the requirements of that lawsuit, started funding the schools the way the Constitution requires. We provided assistance for tenants who are suffering during COVID. We established the Excluded Workers Fund for people that were ineligible for federal relief. And so we did a lot of good things last year that we're trying to continue and grow upon now. One of the things I care a great deal about is what we call the New Deal for CUNY, which is making sure that CUNY is funded properly. And a lot of work still to be done. With a month and a half to go, we'll do the best we can. And I'm happy to come back and report to you once it's all concluded where it landed. And you had a third thing, the bridge. we have been working very hard, many of us on the Queens side, and actually, and folks on the Manhattan side of the bridge, to establish a pedestrian walkway on one of the outer roadways, on the southern outer roadway. Going back many years, they actually had a series of accidents because of the way that road twists when it exits into Queens. There was a couple of week period where we had 3 incidents of cars launching into the local stores on Queensboro Plaza. And so they actually had shut off the nighttime traffic when the visibility was low already. And the city agreed finally to actually take that roadway offline to cars entirely and make it purely a pedestrian walkway. The northern outer roadway is currently shared by cyclists and pedestrians, and you can imagine how difficult that is in that narrow walkway. So the idea is cycling on the northern outer roadway, pedestrians on the southern outer roadway. That's the vision. The city agreed to the vision. It's in their plans. And lo and behold, as they were getting ready to begin implementing it, now they have to repave the upper roadway entirely. So now they've started. That's on delay while they do that work. And we're having a number of lane closures that started, I think, on Monday, if I'm not mistaken, and will last for some amount of time until they repave the entire upper roadway of the bridge. So we're going to deal with some traffic problems, I'm sure, as it results from all of that work. But at the end of the day, I'm excited to get to the point where people can walk over the bridge and enjoy the amazing views that you'll get from the southern view from the Queensboro Bridge.
Awesome. I know that you've got to jump off, so I'm hoping I can have you answer maybe 3 questions. And then, I know that you've got another thing planned. So I know Judy had her hand up first, and then we'll go to Rick. So if you could unmute Judy, please.
Sure, Judy, confirm unmuting.
Okay, hi. Well, welcome to Roosevelt Island. On behalf of the Historical Society, we are going to offer you a tour of the island from stem to stern, from FDR to the girl puzzle. And my question is about our elections. I'm a trainer, I'm a coordinator, I've worked for the Board of Elections for umpteen years. And I know the legislature enacted a lot of legislation last year. I have seen nothing, I've heard nothing, if anything is going to change with the way the Board of Elections works. It's just a very ineffective organization, so we say, and it's very frustrating, and it just does not seem to change. No matter what the politicians say, year in, year out, we have the same problems. Any word on what can be done with this organization?
Yeah, first of all, God bless you for doing that work. My mom used to do it, and she's now 88, so she's retired from her Board of Elections work a long time ago. But it's an incredibly important task, as you know. Let me just take a little bit of issue with what you said. The structure of the board is a mess, and I will talk about what we have in mind to try and repair that. But since we took the Senate majority in 2019, we've done a tremendous amount to change and improve how people vote and how people register to vote. So we have early voting now, as you know, which we enacted. It didn't exist beforehand. We made it easier to vote by absentee, which is why we had so many absentee ballots in the last 2 elections. We have now automatic registration, which we haven't felt the consequences of that yet. But what's going to happen is anytime somebody interacts with the government agency, they're going to be automatically registered to vote if they're not already, right? So we're going to see the roles expand. So we have now launched, we like to say we went from worst to first in New York because we've prioritized a lot of these reforms. Now, they don't mean very much if they're not implemented properly. And that's, I think, what you're getting at.
Yes.
We have early voting. When we had the presidential election, the lines were 4 hours long, even before Election Day, to vote early, right? So we actually passed another law I wrote to require additional early voting sites. Hopefully that will help. But the point I think you're getting at is the board just doesn't function very well. And our election law chairman, Senator Zilmer Myrie from Brooklyn, he has put forward a report and proposals on how we should go about changing that. We're hoping to pass something this year. I think the assembly is a little more reluctant than we are to tackle this problem. But that gets into kind of the legislative negotiations as we go through the session. But I'm hopeful that we can get something done before we adjourn in June on that front.
Okay.
It's a big task, though, right? Because all the political parties don't want to touch it because they're the ones who do the work now. So they don't want to lose that authority.
Okay, so I think we're going to go to Rick, and then after that, we'll go to Ellen, and then we'll say thank you very much. And so if you could unmute Rick O'Connor.
You're
Yes,
unmuted, Rick.
Okay, great, thanks. Senator, I'm the publisher of Roosevelt Islander Online. It's the local media on the island. It's a digital news website. So I'm wondering whether you have any position on the Roosevelt Island residents voting for members of the REAC Board of Directors, and anything that you can do to help fill the vacancies on the Roosevelt Island Board of Directors?
This is my first introduction to Roosevelt Island activists and community leaders. And I know about REAC, I've heard a lot about it, but before I dive into that detailed question, I'd love to talk to you and to the board and to Lynn and develop some more background on what, and actually that's something I'd like to ask Senator Serrano his views on as well. But I'm just starting to get to learn about a lot of this stuff, and I know enough to know that that whole REAC administration question has been lingering for quite some time. So I just want to get kind of educated up on it before I give you a specific answer to that, but I'm happy to sit with you and hear you out on how you think it should be handled.
Okay, sure. Just so you know, there's currently legislation sponsored by Assemblymember Seawright and Senator Serrano on the makeup of the REAC board. That's currently before the legislature.
I will look at that first thing in the morning, and it sounds like if the people who represent the island want that change, then it's likely something I'd be supporting as well. But again, I just don't want to get ahead of myself on the substance of it.
Look forward to talking to you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rick. And Ellen, if you could unmute Ellen, please.
Hi, Senator. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Ellen Polivy. This is Howard Polivy. He's on the board of REAC. One of the few. He's a director on the board of REAC, and one of the few representatives from the island. Lynn's husband being the other one. So
another one.
Another one.
We have two others besides.
So we look forward to meeting you in the flesh, even possibly soon at the local market on the weekend. So one major question that that's dear to my heart is the New York Health Act. I'd like to find out what your position on it is.
I'm a co-sponsor of it, so I'm supportive. It has a pretty substantial price tag, and as we were trying to get it passed, we've run into some concerns that the public employees unions have expressed, so we're trying to work through a very complex web of concerns about it right now. But I am supportive of it.
Okay, I'd like to talk to you about that at some point.
That would be my pleasure. And if I go back to Rick's question, and I guess it relates to the Health Act as well, one thing that I would ask you all to avail yourselves of as it relates to my role in the Senate is I happen to be the deputy leader. Senator Serrano is the chairman of the conference, so he's kind of third or fourth in line too, so he's no slouch, but I do have probably more ability to be effective legislatively than the average senator. And so if there's something as it relates to REAC, for example, I may have a greater ability to get that done than you've experienced in the past. So we should definitely put our heads together on that and see what we can do.
That sounds very exciting. And I know that the community has chafed at different periods because they felt that who was participating in the board didn't necessarily represent the community. And there has been a lot of movement over the years to try to get more people on the board that live in the community, because they feel that they understand the issues intimately because they live here. And so I'm sure that that's something that we can continue to discuss with you in terms of how to move forward on that.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Definitely, definitely. And we don't want to keep you longer than our shared time, but we sure appreciated you coming and joining us today. And I definitely look forward to showing you Roosevelt Island and our farmers market. And hopefully maybe we can twist your arm into coming to Roosevelt Island Day and some of the things that we're really proud of over here.
You won't have to twist my arm, Lynn. You'll be sick of me by the time we're done.
Okay, thank you so much. Really
Okay.
appreciate you coming.
Have a great night. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and move the agenda forward. I am super excited tonight to also have Amanda Matthews, who is the sculptor of the girl puzzle. In the time that I've had an opportunity to be an activist and be an advocate for Roosevelt Island, this is one of the projects that I'm personally the most proud of being a part of. And so I really love the idea that Amanda is going to be able to come and talk to you about her project, her inspiration, and exactly what beautiful gem we now have on our northern tip of the island. So if you could unmute Amanda.
Confirm unmuting.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm going to share my screen. First, I want to say thank you so much for inviting me to speak, and it's lovely to see some familiar faces and some familiar names. Let me share my screen, and I will not be but a speed bump to you continuing your meeting. I'll get through this as quickly as possible, and then I'll be happy to answer questions if there's time. So can you see this first slide, which is me standing next to the giant faces?
Yes.
Wonderful. These are the ladies who are represented in the girl puzzle. These are the ladies who are speaking on behalf of Natalie Blair, on behalf of Roosevelt Island, on behalf of New York City, to the rest of the nation and to the world in this monument. So I like to say that our perspective comes from our experiences plus our categories. Our categories include how we define ourselves and how others also define us. I always want to start by saying that I recognize my own privilege. I am a woman. I have suffered for that, but I am also a white woman, which gives me a certain amount of privilege. Some of my categories include being from a very small town in the rural South. A tiny community called Mount Washington, Kentucky is where I grew up. We were blessed to live above the poverty line, but as a single mother, I could not say the same thing for my own children for several years. I am a woman working in an overwhelmingly male industry in the public realm. This is a quick trajectory of my career history. You'll see a little blip there in the middle. I had worked my way up in public speaking for a large firms. And I lost my job when I was 4.5 months pregnant due to gender discrimination. I like to say that when you start over in life, it gives you a fresh perspective. You see things with what I call fresh eyes. And that has inspired a lot of my work. I'm very inspired by our shared history, where we intersect and overlap. A common theme in my work is the fight for survival, the ability to recognize those who are marginalized. The fight for survival means something different to everyone: physical, mental, emotional, financial. But it really comes down to who has been afforded rights and who is still fighting for those rights. And one of the things that I realized in my own blip in my career is that poverty is not just about financial stability. Poverty is really about a lack of options. So quickly, I want to move into the language of our monuments, because this is our history and this is the story that Roosevelt Island now gets to tell, hopefully differently. Public art has evolved and represents many different iterations of art, but we're talking about public art monuments, which are permanent monuments that tell a story. Historically, in the United States, our monuments tend to tell a story of dominance. This is an image that Paul Farber with Monument Lab provided to NBC News for the national feature story that they did on the Girl Puzzle Monument. And in that interview, he talks about the National Monument audit that was just completed and says that in the top 50 human beings honored in statuary in the United States, only 3 of those are women. And then I did an overlay of that to show that there are also 3 non-white men. I call this the anemic scholarship of our public art in America, and I think it paints the picture for itself. 44 of the top 50 are white men. So the question is, do we have a new idea for how we can change this? New concepts of who we honor and why. Central to our public art monuments, we have just seen there's a reflection of the colonialist history, of our colonialist history, of a patriarchy and of capitalism. And so there's much homogenization. We as a community are far more diverse than our public art reflects. And we have to remember that there's a permanence to these monuments and typically a placement where many people can see. So it takes much longer for these types of permanent monuments to be created and be erected, and they tend to stay much longer than other forms of public art. So what can we change? What should we change? What do we need to change? First of all, representation matters. Community matters. And community and a diverse representation is really not what we see in most of our monuments. So we have to decentralize what has previously been central. We have to tell more stories, reveal a fuller history of the melting pot that is America, and expand accessibility for more people. So in general, my vision is to create public art that promotes community, promotes fairness, equality, and accessibility. And I draw from the author Ray Oldenburg, who wrote the book, The Great Good Place. And he talks about the importance of third place spaces. The first place being your home and the second place being your work. But third place spaces are where people gather and magical things happen. There are some attributes that I feel like are very necessary in our public art, and those are the ones that I've listed. The first one is neutral ground, where everyone is welcome. And we can clearly see in many of our current public art monuments, it is not a neutral ground. So that is something that should be addressed. A leveling place where your economic and social status doesn't matter, which means they can't be behind a paywall, so to speak. You can't have to pay to access them. They have to be accessible. One of the most important things, I think, is interaction, because the space needs to welcome diverse groups of people that and inspire and foster conversation. The thing that I find interesting about this is important in civil society, and it is only reflected in a thriving democracy. We do not see many of these third place spaces in areas of the world where there's not a thriving democracy. And then of course, accessibility and accommodation. And this is not just physical accessibility and accommodation. It is those things, it exceeds those things, but it also includes emotional, intellectual accessibility as well. So the artistic process, I'm not going to speak about this for very long because you can get a 4-year degree in this. Basically, there's concept creation and installation. And in public art, there are lots of other factors involved than in other types of art forms. You know, engineering, pathways, lighting, accessibility, you know, the mere size. For this, I really focus on the concept. And that's how I search for the inspiration that compelled someone to transcend their place in history, which clearly Natalie Blair has done in a million different ways, and then try to determine how their legacy can best be conveyed in a visual media. So as part of the, creation and installation, I share this. This is 1% of what it took to create this monument. I'll start at the top left and just briefly run through this. So I created the maquettes, which is the small scale version. We had those digitized and enlarged, and these giant foam faces were cut with a robotic arm and shipped back to us. And that's me standing on a ladder, working on one of them. Once we finish that, we create molds, and that one section that they're holding is only the center section of Natalie Blair's face. Then we put the molds back together and create waxes. We invest those waxes and burn those out and rough cast the panels in bronze, which you can see. And then that is me chasing some of the metal. We work on the metal with various tools. Then we fit and weld those in our shop. And then there's crating, rigging, loading, transporting, which we had to bring these up, ourselves because of the pandemic, and then the installation on the island. Okay, the girl puzzle. Historically, the standard for a monument honoring a person is a portrait, which we need. We need more portraits of women in particular. The Monument Lab said that if you are a mermaid, you are 11 times more likely to have a sculpture than if you are a female congresswoman. So clearly, portraits and representation is important. With Natalie Blair, though, I wanted to give more than just her portrait. I wanted to convey her legacy, which reaches across the globe. And as a storyteller herself, I wanted us to tell her story to the world. Very quickly, she was born into privilege. Elizabeth Jane Cochran was her given name. And she lived in Cochran Mills, Pennsylvania, which was named after her father. He died when she was 6 years old, and she lost everything and started over. So her position in life changed, her perspective changed and evolved, and her kinship broadened. She knew she had to work. Her mother had to work. They had to fight to survive. And she understood what this fight meant. So the best way we could honor her, I thought, was to continue her great work of advocacy for others. The Girl Puzzle is the title of her first published work in 1885. It is a bold and unvarnished response to bigotry, to an article that was titled "What Girls Are Good For," and the author declared working women a monstrosity. Well, we know that Natalie Blair and her mother had to work to survive. Interestingly, she penned this and signed it "Lonely Orphan Girl." And of course, we all know that she ended up being hired by the Pittsburgh Dispatch. She left there not too long afterward to go to New York City and work for the New York World for Joseph Pulitzer. Her first assignment with the New York World was to be committed to the asylum on Blackwell Island, not knowing if she would ever be released like many of the other women. And I wanted to tie her time to the island to this monument in so many different ways, because I believe that her time on Roosevelt Island, on Blackwell Island, really changed her. First of all, in her book, she is intrigued by faces. She tells story after story after story of faces and feels like that they really reflect her soul. She talks about seeing poverty and hard lives written on the faces of the people in the New York courtroom. She talks about how she had to manipulate her facial expressions to feign insanity. She talks about being happy with the results until she sees the distress on the faces of her companions who are also headed to the island. And she mentions how the very first woman who she encountered in the asylum questioned her insanity and said, "It cannot be seen on your face." Even in her trip around the world, she talks about visiting the great Buddha, the giant face of the Buddha, and she describes it in detail. If you look down in the left corner, you'll see the back of one of the faces. And I'm showing that because we include Nellie Bly's writing on the back, but also we left the scars, the welds, the work, the hard work that it took not only to create these faces, but the hard work that was involved for these women in speaking up and putting their lives back together. And I wanted to include that. We also used a very dark patina, hoping that it would fool your eye and almost give a ghost-like image, which it does. And that's to represent so many of the souls that came to Blackwell Island and never left. So Nellie Bly writes almost immediately after encountering the first woman in the asylum. I determined then and there that I would try by every means to make my mission a benefit to my suffering sisters. Whoops, sorry about that. I believe this was a turning point for her. She experienced the plight and brokenness of these women, and this was the catalyst for her empathy for others. So I wanted to show this empathy and human connection through art. It is definitely conveyed through Nellie Bly's work. And by advocating for others, Bly really did give a voice and a face to women who were marginalized, who had no visibility or prominence in society. She literally gave women the ability to inhabit new spaces, and figuratively. And I really wanted to follow her lead. Interestingly, while we were installing the Lily, the Washington Post sent a photographer to take some images. And this is particularly interesting to me because this is the face of Miyoko Chambliss. She was taken from her home at 18 years old, her home in California, and taken to the Santa Anita racetrack to live, to be interned. And then she was moved to Rower, which was a 500-acre camp in Arkansas with armed guards and barbed wire. And I wanted to include her story because President Roosevelt was the one who signed the executive order for the internment camps for Japanese Americans. Miyoko is an American by birth. And I didn't want this to happen because I wanted to create tension. I wanted her to be facing him on the south end of the island, also on a pedestal and in a similar scale, because I wanted to show their humanity is equal. So they achieve different things in their lives, but their humanity is equal. And I wanted to represent that. So Nellie Bly did not have any trouble finding the other lonely orphaned girl in the Blackwell Asylum. She knew what this felt like. This young woman had been in the asylum for 4 years, and yet she approached Nellie Bly every morning and said, "I dreamed of my mother last night. I think she may come today and take me home." And things like this touched Nellie Bly's heart, and I think gave her the inspiration to keep going. Another thing she writes about, she says in the book that she saw something written on a wall that said, "While I live, I hope." And she said the absurdity of it struck her forcibly because most of the women who were there had no hope of ever leaving. And I wanted to represent this. This particular sculpture is of an older woman who's a member of the queer community. And old age is not guaranteed for anyone, but especially for members of the queer community. And I wanted to convey this beautiful sculpture in such a way. Older women are not conveyed in sculpture. You just don't see that. Queer women are rarely conveyed in sculpture. Asian American women are rarely, Black women. We just don't see these faces, and I felt like it was necessary to include them to tell the story. So Bly's descriptions from over 130 years ago, I couldn't read these words without seeing the images that Miyoko had shared with me, and without thinking about these women who I know, who have similar stories, who have been broken, who've repaired themselves, who are complicated and diverse and magnificent and represent so many facets of humanity, including Asian, Black, young, old, immigrant, and queer identities. And this particular image shows something that I get a lot of questions about, and that's the spheres. Those spheres, think of them as word bubbles. So I wanted to show them coming from Nellie Bly to show the amplification of her voice over time and how far-reaching it is around the world. Nellie Bly was a journalist, women's rights activist, suffragist, war correspondent, inventor, patent holder, industrialist, but underneath everything, she was a humanitarian. And she's famous for many different quotes, and we need for people to be quoting her now. We need more people who say, here would be a good field for believers in women's rights. She summed it up beautifully when she said, I have never had but one desire, and that was to benefit humanity. So Nellie Bly has a very beautiful story. She left such a mark on this earth. And I say that we need more Nellie Blys. Like Bly, we need people to dare greatly, to speak truth to power, to help dismantle systems of oppression, and to proclaim loudly that we all deserve equality and dignity and rights. And I believe this was Bly's message to the world. And that is also the message of the Girl Puzzle. Thank you.
You know, Amanda, I get choked up every time you talk about this. I really do. And I want to tell you a little story, because I was telling a friend of mine that you were going to come and do a talk about your ideas and the thinking behind the sculpture. And they said to me, oh, did I tell you I took my daughter to see the sculpture the other day? His daughter is 4. And he said, I couldn't believe how engaged she was with the sculpture. I had to read each thing to her. She kept running behind the different heads and pretending she was that head. And he told me this great story. And I almost got choked up with that. And I said, you know what? That's the dream that we have, that this sculpture will inspire future, particularly little girls, young women, and just women in general, to speak their truths and to be who they are. And so I wanted to make sure that I told you that little story, because it just kind of was one of those happenstance things where he was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, by the way, we were there recently and this happened. And he said it was kind of fun because it kept her busy for a while.
That's wonderful. We have people who contact us through the website regularly and share with us their personal stories and what it meant to them. One of the things I didn't anticipate were how many people were going to come to the construction fence and how emotional women were about seeing a representation of themselves. And I'm not there to experience that most of the time, but that will stay with me for the rest of my life.
So Amanda, the last thing that I'd like you to talk a little bit about is the women who you are representing. You know, I know you talked about the one Asian American woman who was intoured, but you have little stories about each of the other faces, and I'd love for you to tell that too.
Sure. So we have QR codes at the installation, and you can scan that and hear me narrate the stories. But briefly, I took words written by Nellie Bly and kind of overlaid that, brought that into the 21st century, and told brief stories about some of the women to just show how pertinent these words still are. the African-American woman is Cusha Bacon Brown. She is a dear, dear friend of mine. And the quote that Nellie Bly that reminded me of her, went something to the effect of, "I walked with the grace of a queen past the crowd that had gathered to see the new unfortunate." And I've known Cusha for so long, and I could see her presence in that comment. Cusha suffered the loss of her young daughter, and was completely broken by it. But there's so much more to her story, because Cusha, as a Black woman in America, you know, she has suffered systemic racism in every day. And she just is, she's such a powerful human being and has so much to share with people. But her story is one of brokenness and recovery, and I wanted to include that. She talks about how she has not seen herself represented in sculpture in the United States in her entire life. And how I think on the CBS feature, she talks about how this space is spiritual for her, because the island has these stories of atrocities, but the island also has a message of healing for the rest of the world. And I think for Cusha and for these other ladies, that's ultimately the message. It's not just being broken, it's the story of recovering from that. It's the story of rebuilding. In the same way, I try to tell Miyoko's story, which I've mentioned before. And then the young girl story that's represented actually by my youngest daughter, Audrey, who was involved in a case that was in court, and everyone else was given a voice except for her. And I could hear when Nellie Bly wrote about, you know, I dreamed of my mother last night, she felt abandoned, she felt unheard. She was hoping someone would come and save her and help change her lot in life. And I felt that same thing when I saw that Audrey had no advocate and had no voice. And then the other woman is represented. That's my older daughter, Natalie, who's a member of the queer community. And we just don't see members of the queer community represented in sculpture. And so many members of the queer community don't make it to old age because of discrimination against them. So the quote, "While I live, I hope," just seems so powerful in representing both the older female community and the queer community. So those are stories that I tell through Nellie Bly's words, through her telling of the women who she encountered on Blackwell Island while in the asylum.
Thank you. I think that it really adds something to each of those women to have a sense of that they are people who existed. And I think that helps make a connection. And, you know, I think that's why I was so happy to be able to help you tell your story, because I think it's so important for people to understand some of these really incredible intricacies that you've put into this. So the other thing I'm going to tell you really quickly, being one of the people that was on the deciding committee, we got down to about 5 presentations, and the majority of them were representing Nellie Bly in traditional statuesque form. And then here you come with this big presentation, and we're like, what? You know, like, what is this? But then you started telling us your vision. And I have to tell you, it took everything I had in me not to start bawling when you finished. But that's why I wanted people to be able to hear some of what we heard that day when we took what we saw and you made it this amazing, greater thing than what we were looking at. So I'm just really glad that we were able to get that story out. So let me ask if anybody has a question, please raise your hand. If you could unmute Judy, Saida.
Confirm unmuting, Judy.
Hi. First of all, if you look at the picture of Lynn, there are Amanda's two daughters at the ceremony. Who's in the red coat, Amanda?
That's Audrey. Audrey's in the red coat.
Right, and
Get my head out of the way.
and then your other daughter is in the beige coat.
And
And
she spoke at the ceremony.
uh-huh.
Wait,
Also,
I think that's Miss Judy there.
oh, I don't know who she is.
Judy
Okay,
has on the very bright pink coat.
yeah, that's for sure. Also, if anyone wants to hear Amanda's presentation, not only Amanda, but Rosemary, my name just went, Rosemary Brown from London, who just traveled around the world following Nellie Bly's travel. She and Amanda did presentations at for the public library the other night, on Tuesday night, and they had an enormous audience. It was wonderful. So we're going to have those, and we're going to post those on YouTube this week. So we'll be sending out an announcement. But thank you, Amanda. You just don't stay in Kentucky too long. You have to come visit us soon when the weather warms up.
Oh, we wanted you to come here so we can show you off. I'm just saying.
Wonderful. Roosevelt Island is our second home now. So we love it there. We feel incredibly invested and incredibly supported. And I get messages from people from Roosevelt Islanders all the time. And we love that. We're just so honored that you all have accepted us Southerners into, onto the island.
Anybody else have any questions for Amanda?
I don't see any other raised hands.
Thanks, Saida. So at this point, I'm going to move our agenda forward, and I'm going to ask you, Prince, are you here?
He's here. Prince, confirm unmuting.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Prince. So we'd love an update on capital projects. And
Sure.
we always enjoy your presentations, I just want to say.
Thank you very much. First of all, great presentation, Amanda. And, even though I was involved so deeply with the project, I feel like I learned so much more things than I did, when I was, with you throughout the whole project. So that was awesome. With that said, I'd like to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
We can see it.
Awesome. Nope, that's not what I wanted. There you go. Okay. All right. My name is Prince Shah. I'm the Assistant Director of Capital Planning at Roosevelt Island Operating Corp. What I will be showing today is a lot of the projects that we have completed in 2021. 2021 was a great year for us. We've completed a lot of capital projects on the island, and returned a lot of public space back to the community, and new and improved. So we're very excited about that, and we're still taking that energy from 2021 and bringing it to 2022, continuing on with a lot of our ongoing projects that are currently in construction. So I'll show you the projects that we've completed. We're very proud of our team, as REAC, and especially I can speak for my team, the CPP team. I'm very proud of everyone that's involved in every project, and I think we're happy to say most of the projects were actually on time. I should say all of them were actually on budget, but bearing kind of COVID situations, most of them were on time as well. So very excited. First project that we completed in 2021, or what I'll do is I'll kind of go through the slides. For some reason, part of the slides are not showing up. So let's just do it this way. All right. Starting kind of north to south, the bottom map actually shows you all the projects that we have completed in 2021. You'll see the South Point Park project, which is at the south end of the island. We finished the riprap revetment. We're very proud and excited about this project, and very looking forward to the landscape in spring. You know, when the project opened, it was almost kind of fall, so you didn't really get to appreciate the landscape. So you will see it in the spring, and I'm very excited to see that. We opened the FDR Hope Memorial Project last year. This was a kind of a partnership with the community groups, and then RIA kind of took on the construction of the project, and you know, it was opened. It was the Plaza was opened in 2020, and then we unveiled the sculpture in 2021. The next is Blackwell Plaza Pavers. There was the whole area around Blackwell House had kind of, you know, even though it's been maintained over the years, a lot of the pavers were spalling, breaking. There was a lot of health and safety concerns with tripping hazards and such. So we've renovated the whole area around Blackwell House. So the Blackwell House renovation was completed in 2019, 2020. It was open in 2020. And then the area around needed renovation, and that project was completed in 2021. We also actually renovated the fountain that's in that plaza. The fountain had been off. I've only been with RIA for about 4 years, but I believe the fountain was shut off for almost a decade at this point. So we were able to bring that back to life, and you know, looking forward to community really enjoying that space come spring and summer and later this year. The other project we opened was the Youth Center. Youth Center is very popular public facility that we have on the island. We have a lot of programs that happen at a lot of youth and community-based programs that happen at this place. And I think the team, you know, I can kind of toot the horn a little bit of our team. I think they did a great job figuring out the interiors and the color combinations and things like that. Right. The next project is a project that a lot of the CB8 folks like to talk about a lot, which is the Manhattan Tram project. It is on your side of the tram in Manhattan. Phase 1 of the project was the East Elevator. That was open to the public in 2021. And I'll talk about phase 2 a couple slides down. We've also finished the Motorcade garage repairs. You know, it was a long project and a project that required a lot of community cooperation and you know, really getting used to a lot of the inconveniences that come with construction in such a publicly used space. So we appreciated, you know, you being with us through and through, and now that it's finally open as of last year, you know, I know that, you know, I drive, you know, a lot of times to the garage, and even I used to get lost. So I'm really happy that, you know, all of that has been cleaned up. And, you know, really structurally also, you know, we've done a lot of repairs. So very happy about that. The next project we opened in 2021 is the Mcmanus Welcome Station. It is named after Mr. Jack Mcmanus, Chief Mcmanus, who sadly passed away before the comfort station itself was open to the public. But the comfort station has a green roof. We really tried to use a lot of sustainable materials. And what we have done is this comfort station is next to the Mcmanus field, which is the soccer field. What we have tried to do is really reimagine the space and create a lot of seating, also make it a more park-like, you know, public space. So, you know, you're not just going there to see a soccer game, but now you can go there work. And a lot of times I actually walk by on a nice day and people are working there on their laptops, which is awesome. You know, love to see the public space being used how sometimes you imagine a space being used a certain way and it doesn't for whatever reason. So I'm really excited that it gets used that way. And obviously we opened the Grow Puzzle that, you know, Amanda just spoke about. Very, very proud of this project. You know, it brings a lot of people to the island. It brings a lot of attention to this little island that we have. and it really highlights a subject that no one really talks about, and it really added, there's a lot of data out there, about how many women's sculptures there are, and I think Amanda highlighted that a little bit. And this really added a big chunk to that list. So creating a mark even in American history, essentially, from that perspective. So very proud of this. Let's see, and that was pretty much all the projects that we opened in 2021, which is a lot, as you can see. We had a very busy and exciting year. 2022 was looking very busy and exciting as well, which is awesome. From a lot of projects that will be opening later this year are well-needed community upgrades, and everyone will really appreciate the upgrades that we make. So speaking of ongoing projects, the first project again is Manhattan Tram elevator. Everyone at CB8 loves this. So the phase 1 was open last year. Phase 2, which is the next elevator and the last phase, will be open to the public. We're anticipating completion actually the spring of this year. We are very close to completion of the project, but again, end of construction isn't the end of project, because then we have to get approvals from all of the agencies, DOB, DEP, FDNY, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a long list of approvals that we have to get even after the construction completes. So we're hoping that we'll have all of those by sometime in spring, and then we'll be able to open this to the community. You'll see that there's major upgrades to the area at the tram station, the platform level. Tram was originally constructed in the 70s. Correct me if I'm wrong here. And the use case of the tram at the time and the amount of passengers using the tram at the time compared to the amount of passengers that use the tram now is obviously increased quite a lot. What we needed to do is increase the platform size to reduce a lot of the congestion. We needed to upgrade the elevator and really make sure that it was up to the current code. Even the sizes of wheelchairs have changed from when this was originally constructed to now. So we needed to make sure that at least we're accommodating and making sure that this is ADA compliant, things like that. We've added a lot of other upgrades also into the elevator. This will be very, I think, obviously heavily used space. So we're very proud of finally coming to a close to this project and opening it in spring. Right. The next is sports park renovation. Sports park renovation is ongoing. This is again another very exciting and a major project for us. Currently, as you'll see in the photos, we're finishing up some finishes in bathrooms, locker rooms, changing rooms. We have a lot of other major work to do in the project. So current anticipated completion date is actually fall of this year. So again, adding to the list of things that will open, anticipating at least opening by the end of this year. Again, new ductwork. A lot of the issues and questions and complaints I think people had about mechanically about sports park, aesthetically. We really needed to bring this building to 2021. It was kind of stuck in the past aesthetically and programmatically. So we're doing all of that. Very happy and excited to open this later this year. And the last project on this list is, I know, Miss Birdie's favorite. We really work with her, and I see her out there all the time. So I don't think she's seen these photos, so she's very, I'm sure, excited. We've installed the new lantern sometime actually last year, right before the Natalie Blair opening. So we restored the original lantern design of the lighthouse tower, and that installation's done. Now we're working on the interior. We're working on the interior stair tower installed. This image on the left is actually just from yesterday. So we've begun that work. The folks working on this project, ICC Construction, are doing a great job. I mean, working on, I think, lighthouse is almost their bread and butter. And you can really see in the amount of care expertise, and it's almost like they're sculpture artists, and you know they are very proud of everything they do. So when you go in, you really see the amount of care they take in the work. So very excited to say that this project will also anticipated completion, I should say, in spring of 2022. That's all I have as far as updates. I know
So
there's a lot.
Prince, I
Yes.
wanted to let you know about two things. Thank you for the presentation. As always, you do a fantastic presentation for us.
Thank you.
So I wanted to give you feedback because I've given this feedback to some of the other people at REOC. Trying to work with you all to help make this a better community. One of the things that I wanted to see changed, and I know we've talked about this in the past, was the youth center. And a friend of mine who's a little 9-year-old here who lives here on Roosevelt Island that I've known all her life, I found out that she was going to the youth center. And so I said to her, hey, how do you like the youth center? And she said, I love going there. I can't wait to go there. And again, I mean, I get choked up about this stuff because that's the whole point of wanting it to change, wanting it to be better, to see it really impact these people that I know and care about. And I mean, to me, that's the best feedback in terms of what's been happening at the youth center. And I stopped by there the other day to ask somebody a question, and it was packed with what looked like really happy kids. And I don't think it gets any better than that. So I just wanted to give you that feedback on the youth center. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was how, like, I've been taking the elevator at the tram on a regular basis. I fell a couple weeks ago. I can't do stairs, had to use the elevator. And I would run into people who were like, oh, I love this new elevator. Oh, it's so much bigger. Oh, it's so nice. Look at this view. And I kept saying, wait, this is the extra elevator. Wait till you see the other elevator. And it really is going to be big enough to accommodate motorized wheelchairs, not just one, but a couple, and strollers to boot. And I just am really looking forward to people being able to enjoy that, because one of the things with how small the old elevator was, you couldn't get that many people on it. And this way, people who are traveling together, particularly people who are in wheelchairs that are traveling together, can now travel together in our elevator, which I think I'm just thrilled about. So let me, Rick has had his hand up. Saida, if you could unmute Rick. I think he's got a question for us.
Hi, Prince. Just a question about the Motorcade work. You said that the work was completed, but I've been told that there are a lot of parking spots which are still unavailable, and that there's a huge waiting list of people waiting to get monthly parking. So can you kind of explain what's going on at the Motorcade? If the work has been completed, why is there still some spots, some areas which are off limits?
I can't specifically answer to the fact to why the areas are off limits. I'm actually not involved in that operations piece. I'm only involved on the construction side. The construction piece is, completed. I do know that there are other construction, non-REOC construction ongoing within Motorcade, but I'm not sure where that is since I'm not involved. So, but happy to bring that to our team, and then someone can get back to you.
Okay. And do you know anything about an additional parking facility being built behind Kohler on the Queens side?
I do not. No, I do not have any details on that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Said, if you could unmute Judy.
Okay. So Prince, when is my first trip up the staircase in the lighthouse? I was up there once many, many years ago on, I think, wooden rickety stairs. These look like nice stainless steel stairs. So I really think that Amanda and I deserve a trip upstairs. You know, we want to see the girl puzzle from the other end. And I want to compliment you. The Blackwell Plaza looks great. I hope we get some more furnishings outside the library part. It was rather austere, and I'm sure they're working on that. Also, I hope you have future plans for Blackwell, the rest of Blackwell Park down the hill, because it's really getting worn out. The tram, I went to the tram the other day in Manhattan. I got out, there's a big plaza up here. My God, you know, it's such a different feeling when you get off the new elevators, and it really is impressive. But, you know, I don't say that to re-up too often. So, but I really want to thank you. It's taken long enough, and I hope we can get a good work out of the Parks Department to keep the birds and everything off the plaza, because that's a shame. We have these beautiful glass elevators, and I really don't want to see the wildlife infesting them. So anyhow, but I thank you, and Amanda and I will see you for our trip up the lighthouse soon, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All
Take
right,
care.
thanks, Judy. Does anyone else have a question for Prince? And I just wanted to ask if anyone else from the Roosevelt Operating Corporation would like to weigh in while we're, if you want to, and raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So, and Prince, I just have one favor to ask, because I know it's a lot to ask you to hang around, and this is like your day is over, and I appreciate that you join us for these. But we're going to talk about a couple of quick things in old business that we've talked about last year. And so I just want to kind of give you a heads up on some of the things that we want to move forward and really look into this year. So at this point, I'm going to move the agenda forward to the update on Kohler Task Force. And what I'd like to say at this point is that the Kohler Task Force that Kohler has a new CEO. His name is Stephen Catello, whom the initial reports that I'm getting from the residents at Kohler Hospital is that they seem to be very optimistic and are very happy with, he started about 2 weeks ago. If I understand things correctly, Mr. Hughes's last day will be tomorrow. And Mr. Catello has already started reaching out to different residents and talking to them and getting their ideas and suggestions about moving forward with Kohler. So we're very optimistic at this point about how things may change there, and kind of that looking forward to seeing what may happen with their new leadership. Moving the agenda forward, talking about the status of the resurfacing of the Roosevelt Island Bridge. I was in contact with our representative from the DOT. What she told me is that the bridge resurfacing is now in the bridge division, that they are working on it, and that we will be getting a start and end dates, and what's going to be happening with the bridge in the future this year. So I'm looking forward to finding out how that's all going to play out, and creating that resurfacing helps facilitate a much better cycling safety for everyone. So I'm definitely going to keep following up with the DOT and the bridge division to make sure that that actually gets followed through. And so now I'm going to move to old business. And what I'm going to do is review quickly some of the things that we talked about in our Roosevelt Island committee in the last year, 2021. one of the things that we talked about, so this would be A in terms of old business. Cornell Tech in their term sheet promised us that if we started running into parking and traffic problems, that they would do a traffic study. It's my understanding right now that the pandemic seems to have affected the amount of people in our community that own cars, that we have much more car ownership in our community now. And that, that there's as much as a 400 people waiting list to get into the garage on the island. And I think that that in and of itself denotes that we need to press forward with Cornell doing a parking and traffic study for us going forward, because it is now impacting our community. Another thing that we talked about last year was the idea of an east-west road above the Mcmanus Field. At this point, there's a road that goes halfway, and it helps facilitate the EPA site. What we've been asking is that that road go all the way through to the west side of the island, and that at one time, Roosevelt Island had a northeast-west road. When they built Octagon apartment building, that road disappeared. And so what we're advocating for is that the halfway road goes all the way completely through to add to facilitation of people getting to the end of our island to see some of these wonderful new things that REAC has just finished, and that we can help support them by having a road that, one is for safety, two is for access. And so we're going to continue to follow up on that. Another thing that we've discussed here and is in discussion with our elected officials is the Omni for our Tram, to help facilitate people who have the Omni system, who need to be able to access and not have to double pay if they're going to be using public transportation and the Tram. And so I know that that there's been some discussions, and we'll follow up with that going forward this year. One of the things that we also discussed last year, and I want to thank Prince because he did a fantastic presentation for us. It was an additional doorway to our subway station that would be on the north side of our station near where Starbucks is, that this would help overcrowding, that this could help as transportation demands increase on Roosevelt Island, so that people, particularly with mobility issues, could egress safely into and out of the station. So we will be following up with that. And then the last thing, and this is kind of around Rick's question, we have been discussing with the operating corporation about recovery of green spaces behind Kohler. There's some discussion because of some of the issues with the traffic and parking that that we may lose the depth and breadth of recovery of green spaces. So we'd really like to keep a focus on the keeping as much or recovering as much green space as we can on the north end of our island right before you get to South Point Park. We've seen what were some preliminary plans for that, and we're hoping that we don't lose too much of that or any of that in these other discussions with the necessity for parking and traffic issues. So I want to ask if there's any new business that people would like to discuss at this point.
We don't have any raised hands.
Thanks, Saida. I am super excited about these wonderful presentations tonight. Thank you, Amanda. I am so excited that people have, oh, go ahead, Amanda. Could you unmute Amanda for me, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I didn't want to take up time. I just wanted to let you know that while we have been on this call, I received a link from Pavers Travel. They're one of the world's travel, they create the travel destinations and books. They published an article 2 hours ago that says, these are the world's most enormous art installations. Get immersive with these larger than life installations. And we are listed number 7, the Girl Puzzle in New York City. And it talks about Roosevelt Island and raising the voices of the women who are represented. So I was delighted by this coming in to my phone, and I just wanted to share that with you in real time and say thank you. Thank you again. It's such an honor to be included, and I appreciate it.
So thank you, Amanda. And that is super exciting news. That is really exciting. I think that means we're kind of on the map.
On the world map,
On the
according
world
to this
map.
article.
Super exciting. Thank you. And seeing no new business, I'd like to adjourn. Judy, will you? Could you unmute Judy for a
Well,
second?
first of all, I just dragged out a map from 1960, and you're looking for Road 10 to be reopened. I found a map. Who else?
I don't make this
Who else
stuff
would find a map in their living room of the road from 1960? So, Lynn, we have something to go on. Road 10. We want to restore Road 10, and I hereby move that we adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Oh, wait, Jessica,
Jessica.
could we unmute Jessica quickly?
Confirm and muting, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I was having some technical difficulties earlier when this question came up, but Judy, they are looking at furnishings for the Library Plaza, just so you can be aware of that. And also, Amanda, on the timeliness of the Girl Puzzle things happening, we were reached out to also by Scholastic, and they are doing an article on Nellie Bly for their April New York Times Upfront magazine, which goes to all high schools around the country. And as part of their just, information about Nellie Bly and why she's important, they are adding a photo of the Girl Puzzle so they can talk about her legacy and how it continues.
I love this. I love this stuff. I definitely do. Thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate that. That's exciting news. And I'm going to ask you a big favor that as you get those kind of things, if you can just send me an email so we can keep, keep everybody updated on what's happening with our Girl Puzzle. Because I just think that's, I agree with Prince. I think it's one of the most incredible things that I have been involved with and experienced in my lifetime. And I am so proud to have my little teeny tiny piece of this amazing thing. So having said that, and thank you, Jessica, I am going to adjourn. Thank you everyone for showing up, and I appreciate you all, and see you next month.